Hello there, and welcome to another weekly lesson. I am Julia Gentry, and today is a little bit of a different lesson. Actually, it's a lot of it of a different lesson, but I'm really excited because I actually have a partner in crime with me today because we are going to go into the deep water. You know me, every week you find me here on YouTube talking about the things that are deep and meaty and juicy and giving you the tools to bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. But this one is a big one. And today we're going to be talking about how do you dream in the midst of disappointment. And I wrestled with this because I think that I oftentimes can get real teachy and sometimes a little preachy in the way that we approach this. And the reality is disappointment is so hard. Pain is hard. Loss is hard. And I did not want this lesson to be heady. I wanted it to be soulful and I wanted it to move you forward. And so today I am inviting a very special guest to join me. And her name is Cindy Smith. Everyone say, hey, Cindy.
Hey there. Hi, Julia.
For those of you who don't know Cindy, she is a prayer warrior to me and my team. She is a second mom that I didn't know I needed because I have a pretty decent mom. I mean, she's up there, just knock it right. But Cindy is a second mom that I didn't know I needed. And for those of you who have read my book, Dream, I Dare You, I dedicated this book to my best friend who was killed in a car accident when she was 17 years old on a missions trip. Her name was Mallory Aslan Smith. And so today I get to welcome her mama, Cindy Smith, to our weekly lessons. And even there, right out of the gate, people now know yep, you've experienced disappointment in your life. Yeah. And you look better on the other side of it. This is why she's here, ladies and gentlemen, is because she looks better than she did 20 years ago.
Oh, gosh. Hey, I'll take it.
So today what we're going to do with Cindy real time is we're actually going to anchor into how she has bridged the gap in dreaming in the midst of disappointment. And so Cindy, I would love for you to just kind of connect a few dots for people around what does disappointment look like in your life, just so we kind of know right out of the gate that as you start to give some bombs and scriptures and where you've anchored in, can you give a little bit of context around what does hard look like in your life?
Well, yeah, you already sort of let the cat out of the bag. Losing our daughter, it's been 21 years ago, this summer actually, was definitely the hardest thing ever. And on top of that, I lost my brother, my mom, and my dad within that 2-year span. So it was the family I grew up with, and then my own daughter. We do have a son as well, but Mallory was our oldest, and quite frankly, pretty darn fun. So having that dynamic be gone from our family is definitely tough. It's an understatement. Anybody who's experienced loss of a person knows what I'm talking about, especially what I call a direct hit. A direct hit meaning someone you literally, the blood flows, you're connected on that level. So it doesn't get any worse in this lifetime, I don't think, because there's other things that can happen in a person's life. And it just doesn't go as deep. It's not as intense, and it's not as final as somebody dying.
Yeah. So hence why I'm bringing Cindy in today. And here's also to give some context is too many of us have experienced this type of loss, or we could call it something else, right? But what I see from a lot of people, Cindy, is that once the disappointment, loss, fill in the blank happens, it doesn't always look better on the other side. And when I've watched your life, and when I sit with you, and when I visit with you, and when I get to walk with you, and I've actually watched you walk this journey up close and personal, and even from afar. I mean, our relationship has had so many ins and outs, and our paths diverge. But I honestly will say, like, you to me look better on the other side of disappointment, and that's really where I want to lean in, not to downplay the pain and the process. We're going to talk a lot about that today too. But why I wanted to talk to you is because you look better on the other side of it. And I can't say that for a lot of people, right? It really takes us out of the game, and it takes us away from God, and it takes us, we don't dream anymore. So can you kind of Can you kind of anchor us into your mindset or your heart set around how have you navigated disappointment?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing, I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, really, is the mindset. That had to happen immediately, and thank God it did. And I'm focusing mostly on Mallory, because that was, of all the loss, that was definitely the hardest.
Mhm.
It was, sudden, it was unexpected. I mean, she just graduated from high school, so you feel like you have the whole, your whole world and your whole life ahead of you. And you have, as a parent, you have all the dreams of, the wedding would be the next big decision, which, she was actually talking about that. I mean, she wasn't dating anyone in particular, but she felt like that's the next big decision I'll probably make in my life. So it's, a wedding, it's, a son-in-law, it's grandkids, all those things that anybody, my age certainly looks forward to. And it's sort of like the icing on the cake. So to have that taken away, was devastating, to say the least, and incapacitating. The thing that a lot of people don't realize is that grief is very physical. What it does to you internally, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, just mention any facet of existence, it affects all of it more than you can possibly know. And so you really do kind of have to just initially make that decision. Are you going to acquiesce to it and just fall into the pit of darkness and just let it keep sucking you down? Or do you say, I trust you, God? And that really is the ultimate thing, because to will yourself into happiness, or to will yourself into, a sound mind, even that I think is debatable, without God, honestly. I mean, my personal experience, and like you said, people who've experienced, severe and traumatic situations in their life. And, how you come out the other side really does depend on the choice you make in how you're going to move forward.
So you say a word that's so fascinating to me because you anchor in and you go, God, I will trust you.
Right.
And it's so interesting because in that moment, also logically, it would make sense to go, I don't want to trust God. I want to run from this pain. I want to control this. Right. So how do you even in a moment, how did you even recognize or reconcile to trust in a moment that almost could feel, especially to your point, like when we experience trauma or that caught off guard or something happens that we are not expecting, our tendency is to almost go, never trust again, like consciously or unconsciously. So how did you, because I love that you're going, the only way to get over here to be standing again and thriving and having an incredible life to get the output that we want, right, is to start with a good input. But how in the world did you know to do that?
I can't take full credit for it. I mean, I'd been a believer at the point the accident happened. I'd already been a believer for decades, and, serving God and that kind of thing. My husband and I, Mark, were mostly in the worship leader capacity at that point. And so we had that kind of a background where, hey, that's the deal, right? You're a Christian, you trust God. That's what you do. But yeah, to actually finally just get to a place where, no, this is for real now. This is what we've said we believe. Do we? And it's a fork in the road. And I think too, with what happened with Mallory, I mean, she had been a believer her entire life. We raised our kids in the church, as anyone might suspect. And she loved God. And of course, Julia, you would know that. You were friends with her in high school. And she loved going on mission trips and all that kind of thing. So for her to be on a mission trip and dedicating her summer to God, and serving him, and then to have her die on that trip, there was an aspect of confusion that went with that, which, as you said, could lead to that whole idea of, oh my gosh, like what the heck? How did this happen? God, she was on your watch, you know. Um, So the enemy really could have used that to derail us for sure. But again, there's the Bible verse that even talks about where the disciples said, hey, your words are tough, God. You're tough. The things you're saying to us are hard, but where else are we going to go? Where else are we going to go? Like, what's going to be better than trusting the God of the universe? I don't get it. I don't understand what just happened. And in fact, even at that moment, Julia, honestly, Mark and I both, we looked at each other and were like, you know what? I don't know anything anymore. All these things that we've built our lives on, our faith on, my goodness, read through the Bible how many times, go to conferences, lead worship, lead services, pastor other people, blah, 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 do all the stuff. But then at that precise moment, all of a sudden you just feel like, okay, I missed it somewhere. I absolutely, I'm missing something. I don't even know what anymore, but we need to start over. And the only thing I do know is to trust God. I trust God. And there were days, you've heard me say this, where, especially in those first few days, where I would just lay in bed and staring at the ceiling and saying, I trust you, God. I trust you, God. I trust you, God. I remember one morning saying that for 40 minutes before I could even throw my feet over the side of the bed to get up to go to the bathroom. So that's literally where we started. Everything went out the window and it was start over with, I trust you, God.
It's so interesting that you say that though, because I think that you had said something that, again, we don't want to think about. You said something so practical at the same point, like, what's the alternative to not trust God?
Right.
Then I think that the reality is then we start to lose ourselves where we're really trying to find ourselves, right? Because I could turn to alcohol, I could turn to food, I could turn to another religion, I could turn to depression. Like, there's, at some level, there's actually a multitude of other things that I could turn to.
Right.
But that if we really walk that out, like if we really take that to the finish line of like, I'm going to lose myself in alcohol, or I'm going to lose myself in work, or I'm going to lose myself in a different belief system.
That's actually more it though, I think, Julia. I don't even know if sometimes if it's actually a decision that people make in a moment like that. It's kind of goes back to what I said before, where you just kind of fall into it.
Yeah.
Because when you get hit like that, all of a sudden, like I said, it takes your breath away. Every part of your being has just been debilitated and like I said, I think the default is to just slip into it. And it's whatever your bent is, maybe whatever presents itself first, that's where you go. And you just acquiesce to it. I feel like most people that, again, have experienced this kind of loss, that is typically what happens. They just fall into it, and they're never the same. They're never the same. Their identity literally becomes the loss.
Okay, so there's two things there. So let's come to that. Your identity becomes the loss. Hold that thought. Write that down. Okay, I gotta come back to that. Hold on. Okay, so let's push pause on that for someone who's actually lost another person. To your point, a direct hit. Okay, now let's say we take that maybe a few levels up, and I don't want to say that there's a worse or a better loss, but let's say it's a loss of a job, or it's a delayed dream, or it's I don't have enough money in the bank, or it's I got rejected the 100th time. Like, let's kind of take it a level up on other areas that people would say, I stopped dreaming because the disappointment was so hard, right? A different kind of hard.
Right.
So how in that moment would you say that we create a default to actually trust God? You know what I'm saying? Like, if I know that this is a really big question, but in theory, what we need to be doing as believers, to your point, is going, no, if I believe, then I need to believe on good days and hard days, ups and downs, right? So, but like, how have you now looking back, and if I'm sitting before you going, that's not my default right now, Cindy, a hard day comes, my default isn't trust God. My default is alcohol. My default is work more. My default is avoid the hard conversation. How do I have trust God be my default?
You make the decision ahead of time. That's it. Like kind of on a different, different level, kind of like what you're saying. When Mark and I first got married, which has been 42 years ago now. When we were engaged, we made the decision then and said, we will never get divorced. Divorce will never be an option. We will never kid about divorce, and we will never say it. It's just, we won't even kid about it. So we said that when we were engaged, which, you know, when you look back on it, those are like the best days, right? Those are the days when you're still working at, you know, impressing the person. Yeah.
Totally.
Everything's all good and everything's like, woo. Yeah, there's nothing bad is happening, so to speak. So, but you know, we made that decision then. So it's always been off the table. So even when we had really, really hard times, you know, and there were some periods. I remember when we'd been married 15 years, Julia. This is a little tidbit I probably never told you. I was just going through such a hard time. Mostly it was hormonal, I would say. And I come to find out later there was some things that needed to be adjusted, and you know, I was able to do that, you know, with my doctor, thankfully, because seriously, it just made me feel mental. But during that period before we figured that out, I was so mad at Mark. Like I would get so mad at him, and I can't even tell you to what degrees. And really, it was irrational. Sometimes, even when I would think about what I was mad about, there was that part of me that's going, God, this is stupid. Just let it go, would you? And I'd be like, heck no.
Oh my gosh. Well, that needs to be a whole nother topic. Can we please talk more about that? Like you can see the moments happening and you're like, no, I will continue to be irrational.
Right.
Completely.
Dagnabbit, I'm going to dig my heels in. I'm writing this puppy in. Yeah. So, but even then, like I can remember, so like I'm kind of out of my mind with that, you know, just like I said, just even though there's a part of you that knows this is stupid, you just keep doing it anyway. But like I said, we figured out that was hormonal, and once we got that straightened out, all that fire went away. Thank God. That's a whole separate subject. If you ever want to do a podcast on that,
stay tuned next week for hormonal imbalance.
Yeah. So yeah, that could be for another time. Anyway, but my point just is that because, and I can say this honestly and truthfully, because we had made that decision all those years before, and like I said, that was somewhere around the 15-year mark, I never went there in my head. It was like, okay, I'm mad, and I'm staying mad, but I've got to figure this out, because, you know, the bailing is not an option.
Bailing, yeah. So that's interesting. So now if we bring this in, right? So at some level, now if we correlate that to a moment, right? The hard moment comes. And again, I think we have to reserve the loss of a loved one kind of over here, because that, right, there's a lot there. So if we bring it into some of the semantics of the day to day, you know, like
Right.
I get an email and I'm rejected, or I put myself out there and I get denied, or I lose the money, right? Or I lose my job, or right. Like, so what I'm hearing you say is that like, I have to make a decision ahead of time that I'm staying the course before the course gets all funky.
That's right. Okay. Because let's face it, it's going to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
So then walk us through. Okay, great. So at some level, we have to decide before we even get going that I am in, and I will not bail, which I think will help us at some level pick the right kind of dreams, pick the right kind of friends, pick the right kind of marriage. Like in theory, if we actually think that through, like if I'm not going to bail, choose wisely.
Right. That's right.
At the starting line, choose wisely, because if I get married, if I pick this dream, like, right, choose wisely. Yes. But then talk to me about, you made that other comment around how we actually could start to identify with the loss. So yes. I think that there could be two trains of thought, because again, who Cindy was before losing Mal and who Cindy is a month after losing Mal is, I really want to unpack that. And then I also want you to go again to this like micro level on a day-to-day of how we could even do that with loss after loss, or failure after failure, or right, those hard moments. So can you kind of bridge the gap of like, what did you mean about the identity and loss over here? And how do you think that impacts people on just a daily basis?
How it impacts, or, well,
let's talk to this one over here. When you said that you identify the identity in the loss. Can you talk about that first?
Yeah, well, it's just something that you see people do. And it doesn't even have to be the loss. It can be, well, let's be honest. I think that's a lot of what's going on right now in the world. People have done it with victimhood. We have like identity politics right now and things like that going on, where people are wanting to glom onto something, because it gives them a sense of purpose and identity. And it's not, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not going to be fulfilling, because it's fleeting and it's not eternal. And it's probably not even genuine in terms of who you are, what you are, and what you should be pursuing.
So let's talk about that for a second. You guys, this just, by the way, when I go hang with Cindy, this is the kind of stuff we talk about on a long walk. We lose ourselves on walks and we get too far, and this is what we get to talk about. So
Rabbit trail.
it's identity. How do a lot of us identify ourselves in the loss, no matter what it is? Talk about that. Like we actually start to go, I lost, so I must be a loser. Like I failed, so I must be a failure. Like I lost someone I loved, so now I'm just a victim to that loss. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Or because I've met people who, when they've lost, especially kids, like I said, it's just kind of a different level of loss. That's just who they become. You can be meeting them for the first time, and within 3 to 5 minutes, they're going to talk to you about losing that child. And I'm always a little bit amazed, although I guess I could say not so much anymore, but sometimes I'm actually amazed at how much time has gone by, since the action, because the way they talk, and I'll listen to them for a few minutes, and then at some point I'll ask them, well, when did this happen? How long's it been? And it's been 18 years or it's been 24 years. And I just think, wow, okay, your life stopped.
Oh man, how do you know? So what's that for you, right? Maybe this isn't this perfect formula or algorithm, but how do you know when you grieve and you heal and you process, and when you can no longer live from that place? Like when you start to live it, like, is there a gap? Is there a bridge? Is there like, how do you know when to do that?
How do you know when to do what?
Well, because I've watched you no longer hold on. And I would say, again, I wasn't up close and personal on those days that you couldn't get out of bed, but I've watched you from afar. And again, this has been years, but I don't ever remember watching you hold on to it like it's your identity.
Right. Yeah.
So
it was a choice.
like when is that? When do you know when that choice is? When do you know, like, how do you, what is that?
It goes back to trusting God. It goes back to the trust God decision, because what happened then was we said we were going to trust God. So it's not like you just sit back and then just go, okay, God, do something, like zap me or fill me or help, it's, of course it's help me, but it's a word you use a lot, Julia, is alignment. It was at that time aligning ourselves. I'm including Mark in this because thank God both him and I were just on the same page with this and pretty much processed together and helped each other together and bounce things off of each other together. But it was immersing ourselves in the Word of God, and really learning it on a whole new level. That was part of what I was talking about. Like, here we were, pastors, church planters, been in ministry for decades, but all of a sudden you just feel like, I don't know anything. There were Bible verses that we knew, and even verses that we had hung on to that we thought meant one thing, and it turned out maybe it really meant something else. Sometimes Bible verses, it's like you really like the way one sentence sounds, but read what says before it and read what it says after it. A lot of times just that alone changes everything.
Totally. Or you're amplified. I love, there's times that I'll be reading the Bible. I'm like, Cindy, what does amplified say? What are we doing over here? And all of you're like, oh my gosh.
That's where all the nuggets are. That will be a massive thing I will pass on to all of your people. Amplified Classic Version of the Bible is golden, golden.
Yeah.
Amplified, it's louder.
Yeah.
Louder, right here. Get it.
So, but I remember a moment for me, Cindy, and I do want to lean into the scripture because, me being one who grew up in the church, and again, scripture at this level.
Yes.
And then it's in these hard moments that you're actually tested on, do you know it at a deeper level? Do you actually believe it as though it's your daily bread?
Right.
And so for me, one of the scriptures that I've always known is resist the devil and he will flee from you, right? Draw unto God and he will draw near to you. And I can remember the day that I called you. This was in our farm phase. So this is when we bought the farm. We liked the idea of the farm. We didn't actually want to be on the farm. Like we did not decide ahead of time that we weren't not going to bail. I didn't like the farm that much. But I can remember being at this like stressful time and like looking at these scriptures and going, Cindy, I'm having these negative thoughts. I'm wondering if God is even real at this level. Like, how do we know the Bible is even true? And how do we know that someone just didn't make this up? And do you remember when I called you that day?
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago, really.
No, and it was after I published, like I got best-selling book in Christian leadership. I was like, I should get this squared away because this is not going to bode well if I don't figure out what I believe here. But you were such a safe place for me to call. And that scripture, that's the first one that you said. And this brings up such a good point because I think that there is a little bit of this process of when those hard days come, there's like a couple of instructions in that verse that you help me see, which is number one, resist the devil. Like you have to, like you just said, like it's a choice. It is a proactive measure that I actually have to push back on what's coming at me. And then you say, I need to draw near to God and he will be near to you. Not that he's not always near to us,
right?
But there was this revelation of like my drawing near to him reveals his heart towards me, right? His revelation towards me. That's been there all along. And I remember for weeks having these moments with God. And I think he even texted you going, he is that close. Did you know that he was this close? Like, are you aware that he is this good?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think you're saying something like when we immerse ourselves in him at a level that he is always available to us, but it becomes real to us when we like posture ourselves towards him.
Yeah. Posture. Absolutely. Yeah. And even that's a decision because trust me, in the beginning too, those first weeks, I'm not even kidding when I say that reading my Bible or reading devotionals that of course are all centered around Bible verses was exhausting to me. I could barely read a page and I just would have to check out. And again, it goes to that physical thing. And anybody, again, who's experienced loss at that level would know that it's hard to focus sometimes. And so I would have to take breaks with that, but we just kept coming back. Day and night. And it was like bread. Absolutely. And it still is. Honestly, you know this. In fact, I'm in my room right now. This is my sanctuary room that I love. I have a chair right over there that I sit in first thing in the morning, as long as the day will let me sit there. I read my Bible, I journal, I read devotionals, I get on live prayer casts, whatever, anything along those lines. Certainly I'm praying, kind of woven throughout that whole thing. It's literally sanity to me. And I think a lot of us, even believers, we treat this as kind of an optional thing. I know I have family and friends who've been believers for decades, and they will tell me, they read, like some little devotional, like Our Daily Bread, which I'm not slamming that at all by any means. But like, that's literally the only thing they read. Hey, I got a Bible verse and I got a little synopsis and poof, off they go. But they'll watch TV for 7 hours, after work, literally from the time they get home until they go to bed. And I just think, wow, how do you do that?
So you just, again, these nuggets, you're dropping bombs. Thank you. If this is nothing else but for me today, thank you. So everybody, thank you for joining my coaching counseling session with Cindy Smith. But I think you're reframing it in a way that turns logic upside down, right? Which is that Bible verse, right? trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, which means I have to give up my right to understand, right?
Right.
But what you're doing is you're turning some of the logical, well, I shouldn't trust God and I should, and you just said presence is sanity. Like his
Yes,
presence is sanity. It's not optional.
it's
It's
not.
sanity.
That's right.
You know, so
And for me, you know, the hit was hard enough. The hit was hard enough to where the trusting God part, that's what it meant.
yeah.
It meant, okay,
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that, you know, that goes back to so many of the things. And this is why I just love that you're here with me today, is because, you know, losing a best friend is very different than losing a daughter. And so the semantics of like, what won't break you will make you, and that the moments of hard are there to, that God is actually building within you character and resolve and a testimony. And, you know, it can be so trite, but hearing your voice on this of saying these things of like the hits are hard enough a lot of times day to day, or the little hits, the continual hits, right, that over
right.
time are adding up. And you know, I think that what you're saying is that the ultimately how we navigate these waters of disappointment is in his presence. It's the one area that the tendency will be to remove ourselves from it, right? The area that we need the most is the area that we oftentimes avoid, but that is the simple, stupid, hard answer, which is presence. His presence equals sanity, right?
And I would challenge anybody to really just take that and I was going to say, you know, take the challenge of that, because if most people look at their lives, they will very quickly and without much thought be willing to talk to friends, read self-help books, go to some seminar, pay counselors. And listen, I'm not slamming counseling, but I will say that I know plenty of people that happily go every week and are shelling out $150 or more, money that they don't have in a lot of cases. And yet the God option was skirted over. And I really do believe, just because of my own experience, I really do believe if people sincerely, I mean, seek and ye shall find, right? Sincerely allowed God, and I say allowed because it's the choice, goes back to the choice thing, allowed him to move and to speak into their lives in a real concerted way. I think a lot of people that are jumping into all these other aspects of trying to help themselves and relieve themselves from pain and stress and hurt would be incredibly surprised at how they would look, how they would sound, and how they would feel, and the peace, the soul peace that they would have on the other side.
Okay, so we're doing a challenge. I know you're just making this up on the fly, but if we had a Cindy challenge for all of our listeners, I'm in. I'm gonna take the challenge.
Okay.
So you say take the challenge. So if we could say, if you could now, we're not gonna, maybe we're gonna take the challenge. What would the challenge be? So if someone's sitting there going, okay, what did she say? Write that down. What's my challenge? What's our challenge?
Challenge is literally every day to seek God. And what does that mean? I mean, it sounds broad, right? And I will say this, it looks different for everybody because there's so many facets to what that means. It is reading the Bible. And I know that even seems daunting. It's a gigantic book. I've got mine right here. It looks like the Yellow Pages. It's enormous. Does anybody even know what the Yellow Pages are anymore? I don't even know. It's 1,500 pages, you know, it's a lot of pages in my Bible. But start with the Gospels, you know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Read Proverbs. Proverbs is written by who God said was the wisest man who ever lived. Nobody was before him, and nobody would come after him who would be wiser. Read Proverbs, read Ecclesiastes. He wrote that, actually, Solomon, after he fell. So that has a real interesting perspective on after he stepped away from God. So you can kind of see the other side. Psalms is another book I would recommend, but the whole thing, obviously. but I'm just saying, if it seems too daunting and overwhelming, go there first. So you spend time in the Word. Devotionals, the old devotionals, there's so many that are out now, but I have to tell you, devotionals that I look at that are old, and I'm talking about 100 years and more, Utmost for His Highest by Oswald Chambers, Streams in the Desert and Springs in the Valley by Mrs. Charles Cowman. These are people who lived on the mission field, people who chose to just really push themselves out there and serve God. And they speak in a way that we just don't talk anymore. And by that, I mean, they expected hardship in life. And when it happened, it didn't derail them the way we are derailed now. I mean, I feel like our whole country's derailed. People in general, like I hardly know a person who just isn't struggling anymore on some level. And there's part of me, I can't believe it, but then on the other hand, I can. But it doesn't have to be that way. That's the thing. So anyway, there's that. There's the devotionals, worship music, playing that. Fill the atmosphere in your house or in your car. What are you really listening to? What do that's the thing. What are you filling your mind with? Are you listening to talk radio all day? Are you listening to the news? It will make you a psycho. It's not good news. So read the good news. The gospel, the Bible is called the good news. So if you're washing your mind and your head and your heart with that, it's going to change how you look at things, how you think about things, and how you feel.
I love it. Wash your mind, you guys.
This is the good kind of brainwashing.
Take a brainwash. Okay, so here's our challenge. We're going to do a 30-day Cindy Smith challenge. We're going to have a brainwash. Every day we're seeking God. We're reading the Word. We're going to get in an oldie but goodie devo, and we're going to worship. Every day.
And pray, obviously.
Yeah, pray every day.
Pray throughout the whole thing. The other thing I do too, I do this on purpose. The first thing I do in that quiet time that I have in the morning is I have, just cheapo journal thing, spiral bound notebook. The first thing I do in the morning is I think of 3 things that I'm thankful for.
So good.
3 things. And it can be simple. It can be 1 sentence. Sometimes I elaborate.
Yeah.
But it just 3 things. And the reason I do that is because I'm grabbing my head and I'm grabbing my heart and I'm saying, I will be thankful. I will be grateful. I am not going to focus on what I don't have. You focus on what you do have and what you can be grateful for. All of us can be grateful for something. We can be thankful for something every day. And I know the cynic and some people could say, well, yeah, but what about the homeless guy on the street? Well, first of all, if the homeless person is sober, so to speak, even that person can be thankful for the opportunity God gives them to be saved from hell. And if it's not being saved from hell on this planet, certainly it will be on the other side. Yeah.
Man, Cindy, this is so amazing. Right? We really could talk. There were so many incredible things that you said, but if you could kind of wrap it up with the one person who's just at that Y in the road, and any level of disappointment, right? Maybe it's as simple as they just lost their job, all the way to their 15 years still grieving a loss, but they're at that Y in the road of, do I believe? Where do I go from here? What would you tell that person?
Wow. Well, beyond what I've already said.
Just listen again. She would say, repeat what you heard.
Yeah, that's right. Go back to the beginning of the podcast, start over, just hammer it in. Yeah, you just have to choose. You have to decide which way you're going to go. This is the thing, Julia. I think in some ways people want the profound answer, but it's not hard. And it's not profound. It really is simple. It really is simple. It really is trust God. And even for the non-believer, I would say, why don't you give him a shot?
Yeah.
And I think part of part of the reason that that's hard for somebody who maybe isn't a believer. Obviously, there's so many other questions and reasons why people don't believe. But I will tell you this, one of the Bible verses, and, I do have a boatload of verses that I love, for my life and that have become very significant in this journey. But because we haven't read any of them, Julia, let's finish with one.
Great, let's do it.
This one stood out to me today, and it was kind of along these lines, the idea of what about, because I know you have a lot of people that you coach and help and come to your conferences that maybe don't believe, maybe they're not Christians, but this came to mind today, and it's in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11. It says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time," and he being God. "He has also planted eternity in men's hearts and minds, a divinely implanted sense of purpose working through the ages, which nothing under the sun but God alone can satisfy. Yet, so that men cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end." And so my point in that is, it kind of goes back to, we touched on a little bit before, that people are so willing to do just about anything else except God. So, and it says right here that there's nothing under the sun but God alone who's going to satisfy that. He has put eternity in our hearts, in the heart of every man, which is why everybody's always searching for something. Always searching to be happy, always searching for justice, always searching for happiness, always searching for peace. You're not going to find it outside of God. That's not to say you can't have moments of it. That's not to say you can't, brush up against it and experience it, which I think even allows us to know even more that it's out there.
Yeah.
It's out there. It's somewhere,
Yeah. Well, it's almost like the trolls, right? The Bergens keep thinking that if they just eat the trolls, then they're going to be happier, and it's true. But I think even in our work, we've learned that, right, your level of dreaming is dependent upon your level of freedom. But as I lean into this freedom message, my level of freedom is dependent upon my dependency in him. Right? It's not like I have more money, then I'm free. I have more happiness, then I'm free. I have my ducks in order, then I'm free. No, my freedom is dependent upon my dependency in him. And so I think that's a beautiful place to anchor. And it is simple, stupid, hard, but ultimately the way through disappointment is just trusting God, because you trust God, right? It's almost looking beyond the dream, right? It's like, you can't trust the dream. You have to trust the dream giver. I can't trust life on this planet. I have to trust the one who gave me life. I can't trust the destination. I have to trust the one who holds all of this in his hands. And I think we start to just trust what we can see. And we've just forgotten, oh, wait. I got to look a little bit higher. I need to trust the one who gave me the dream, the one who's given us life, right? The one who holds the beginning from the end. Yeah. And to your point, it is not complex. It's just simple, stupid, hard.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I'm also going to lean in and I'm going to get all of those scriptures that Cindy has anchored into over the last, 15 years to build trust in God. I will put those in the show notes and the links below that you can find those. To everybody else if you are looking for a community, you are looking for a place to lean in, we will also have our links down below in regards to joining us as we take our dreams by storm and giving you some of that framework in our mastermind group. But more than anything, thank you, Cindy, so much for sharing your time and your heart and your testimony and your vulnerability of learning how to trust God in the midst of the disappointment.
Absolutely. Thanks for asking.
Until next time, dream on.